It is hereby ordered, adjudged, and decreed that after a jury trial before the Honorable Louis A. Kaplan, plaintiff E. Jean Carroll has judgment for damages against the defendant Donald J. Trump for an aggregate sum of $83,300,000. That order is essentially a bill. Donald Trump must pay the $83.3 million he owes to E. Jean Carroll immediately. It does not matter that Donald Trump is appealing this case. It does not matter that Donald Trump is running for president. It does not matter that Donald Trump believes he had a good day at the Supreme Court yesterday. The law is binding, and Donald Trump must either fork over the money or pony up some collateral to someone who will fork over the money for him. Now, this order from Judge Kaplan is an important reminder that while Trump may have breathed a sigh of relief at the Supreme Court yesterday, there is still a lot of legal peril on the horizon for him, the very near horizon, like next week. Recall that at the beginning of this week, a D.C. appeals court thoroughly and unanimously rejected Trump's claim that he has presidential immunity and he cannot be prosecuted for trying to overturn the 2020 election. Now, that federal election interference case against Trump has effectively been put on ice while this presidential immunity issue works its way through the courts. But Trump has until Monday to tell the Supreme Court whether he plans to appeal. And whether or not the court decides to keep this case frozen after Monday to essentially make time for Trump's appeal could tell us a whole lot about whether this court is sympathetic to Mr. Trump or whether this court is quite the opposite. Many legal experts here believe that the win the court is about to hand Donald Trump in the 14th Amendment case may be offset by a potential rejection in his bid for immunity in the election interference case. As Professor Richard Hassan writes for Slate, a grand bargain that appears to make practical sense as a compromise is beginning to come into view. The Supreme Court unanimously holds that Colorado does not have the power to remove Donald Trump from its ballot. But in a separate case, it rejects his immunity argument and makes Trump go on trial this spring or summer on federal election subversion charges. So it's a big moment in which we may know whether the Supreme Court is inclined to let the federal criminal trial go forward before the November election. But that's not it. And it's not the only case where Donald Trump is relying on so-called presidential immunity to shield him from accountability. There is also the civil lawsuit brought by Capitol Police officers who were trying to hold Trump civilly liable for the violence they faced on January 6th. Trump's lawyers have until Thursday to ask the Supreme Court to weigh in on that case as well. And Thursday is also the day that Trump's lawyers are due in a Manhattan courtroom for a pretrial hearing in Trump's criminal case involving hush money paid to an adult film actress, Stormy Daniels. That hearing could be where we learn when that case will go to trial. And then there is Trump's New York civil fraud case, the one where he could be forced to pay hundreds of millions of dollars and liquidate the Trump Organization in New York. We are still awaiting Judge Arthur Engoron's verdict in that case, which could come any day now, very possibly next week. Now, arguments in that case finished about a month ago, but that's not stopped Trump's lawyers from getting into all kinds of fights with the judge in this case as he weighs his ruling. At present, Judge Engoron is concerned that one of the top financial executives in the Trump Organization committed perjury, or at least that's the reporting. So Judge Engoron wrote to Trump's lawyers asking them for any information about that executive and his potential perjury. It seems germane to a case involving Trump's financial dealings. And Trump's lawyers sent Judge Engoron a scathing response. A response calling the judge's request for information unprecedented, inappropriate, and troubling. Well, yesterday, Judge Engoron fired back. When I sent my straightforward, narrow request for information, I was not seeking to initiate a wide-ranging debate with counsel. However, your misleading response grossly mischaracterizes the letter that I wrote, and I feel compelled to respond. You and your co-counsel have been questioning my impartiality since the early days of this case, presumably because I sometimes rule against your clients. That whole approach is getting old. It really seems like Trump's lawyers are going maybe out of their way to anger this judge who is about to decide whether or not to dissolve Trump's entire business in the state and make him cough up as much as maybe $370 million. And these lawyers are doing it at a time when several of Trump's other cases, civil and criminal, might be about to start moving forward. It's all a very interesting strategy. But hey, at least Trump will probably still get to run for president in the state of Colorado. Joining me now is George Conway, a conservative lawyer and contributor to The Atlantic. Also with me is Rick Hasen, UCLA professor, director of the Safeguarding Democracy Project, and author of the upcoming book, A Real Right to Vote. Professor Hasen, let me just start with you. I know both of you all have very important, essential reads today and in the last week. I'd love, Professor, if you could talk a little bit more about the grand bargain you see developing and what it portends for this potential presidential immunity appeal from Donald Trump.
Well, it's kind of a fortuity for Jack Smith, the special counsel, that the immunity case is arriving at the Supreme Court right as the court is deciding what to do in the disqualification case. You may remember that Jack Smith went months ago to the Supreme Court, tried to leapfrog the Court of Appeals, get the court to rule on this. The whole ballgame is timing. Now it seems like, with a majority of justices, both liberal and conservative, seeming to side with Trump in the disqualification case, you could see that there could be a lot of pressure on the other side to say, let's let this case go to trial, the case on election subversion in Washington, D.C. So Trump wins one, he gets to stay on the ballot, but he loses a big one. He goes on trial this spring or summer for election subversion in Washington, D.C., thereby letting the voters decide whether or not Trump is really disqualified from serving for office.
Can I just follow on that, Professor, just because when we hear the term grand bargain, we usually think of congressional negotiations or legislative negotiations. Is it now sort of just accepted that the Supreme Court is so clearly letting politics, or at least political perceptions, intervene or at least inform the decisions they're making in big pieces of litigation?
Well, I don't think they're actually going to be bargaining and saying, I'll vote this way if you vote that way. But I think that there's a kind of tacit agreements in these kinds of things, and how much pushback, say, the liberal justices are going to give in the disqualification case. Remember, you've got 6 Republican-appointed justices. You've got 3 Democratic-appointed justices. It's not going to be a good look for the Supreme Court if it's a 6-3 decision. I don't think that's likely to be. But if Justices Kagan and Jackson, at least, are willing to go along here, then, you know, it takes 5 votes to put a stay in place in that immunity case. It takes only 4 to have a hearing. The justices have got to know that all the eyes are on them, and it's going to look a lot less lopsided if the court gives with one hand and takes from the other, even if they're not engaged in the kind of horse trading that you might see on the floor of the House of Representatives. Right,
not quite. Well, there's not as many horses to be traded, shall we say.
If it makes you feel any better, I have already put EVAC on alert. He's ready to go if it comes to that. General, I can assure him.
Hey, General, let me into the war room to see you, so I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
Sir, come on, when is it not, please? Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the dough. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah. I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I'll assume that we're going on the other stuff.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
This was just a diversion. Security, please bring up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name?
Evac, sir.
Right, Evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy sustained attack. They appear to be after the